Hello, everybody. This is Michael Butterman, music director of the Shreveport Symphony Orchestra, and today we are going to be sharing with you the first movement of the Fifth Symphony of Tchaikovsky, performance that the symphony gave back in September of 2019 at First Baptist Church, as a matter of fact. And you can, of course, skip right to that performance by looking in the description below. You'll see a time code for where that begins. But I thought, though, we would take a moment to kind of introduce that movement through my friend Jake Hale, who is the principal clarinetist with the Shreveport Symphony. And the clarinets play an important role at the beginning of this movement, which is why I thought of him immediately. But maybe even before we get there, let's just take a moment to get to know Jake a little bit. So Jake has been with, how long have you been with the symphony, actually? Do you recall how many years it's been?
I think it's either I just finished the 5th year or the 6th.
It is one of those. I remember that when our longtime principal clarinetist Tom Phillips retired, we held a nationwide audition. We had a lot of really wonderful candidates come through. It was all blind, by the way. All this is done behind a screen. And then when the winner turned out to be, at that point, well, you're still very young, but you were very, very young then. You were just finishing your undergrad degree at Baylor at that time. Is that right?
Yeah. I was just finishing my music education degree, actually, at Baylor. I was in my last year, my last semester in school before I went and student taught, actually.
Right. That's right. I do remember that. And one unusual thing was that one of your colleagues, in fact, the person you sit directly next to in the Shreveport Symphony, our principal bassoonist, Ann Shoemaker, is a professor at Baylor. So one of your, I mean, I guess she wasn't directly your teacher, but a faculty member at the school where you were an undergrad student.
Actually, she was. She was my chamber coach for,
Oh, no kidding.
I mean, maybe 3 or 4 semesters. So we actually had worked together, more of a, teacher-student relationship.
Right.
But then, when I joined the orchestra, obviously it was an interesting dynamic having a teacher-student relationship and then also colleagues working side by side, literally sitting next to each other.
Yes, literally right next to each other. That's right. Well, also then you then pursued a master's degree at Rice University, which is one of the great schools of music really in the world. And during that time, they make a lot of demands on your time there, and that's in Houston, of course. And we're up here in Shreveport. We didn't see you very much for a couple of years while you were doing that, but you did manage to get here for, well, as many concerts as you could during those couple of years. Tell me what that was like, the difference between being a student there and then coming up and playing a lot of times a pretty quick gig here in Shreveport.
Yeah, it was very different. When you're a student, you work on, you're developing your abilities and you're working on, all sorts of rep. But and then in the orchestra, we spend a month, several weeks actually practicing and rehearsing music, very difficult music. But then, then I'd go and play a concert in Shreveport, and because I was limited which concerts I could do, typically there were the pops concerts, and it was a very different dynamic showing up, having a 2-hour rehearsal and then an hour break and then playing the concert.
Exactly.
Very, very different than, all right, well, I got this piece of music and we've rehearsed it for a month and now we'll play 2 concerts on it. Very different dynamic for sure.
Right. I think that's it. In the professional world, there is, I don't think a lot of people realize that, who are not doing this for a living, that especially when it comes to pops concerts and things of that nature, they have to come together incredibly quickly. And literally you will have played through something, usually a maximum of once, sometimes 0 times, I guess, depending on what the piece might be. But you just got to talk about where these transitions are going to be, how we're going to do them, and then okay, let's make it happen. So that is a difference. But you, unlike a lot of your colleagues there, had this experience of being both a student but also having this professional experience. So I think that gave you a different perspective probably than a lot of them had. And now you're a teacher yourself. Tell me about what you're doing in the Dallas area.
Yeah, so now I live in DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I teach private clarinet lessons. So in a normal situation, I would drive to the schools and teach the students during either before or after school or during their band classes. And I'm only teaching clarinet players. I'm helping them, make proper tones, sound better, developing their musicality, working with them with all sorts of different music, whatever they need to help develop their skills and abilities. And I've got some students that are really driven and really sound amazing for being, 12, 13, 14 to 18. And then I've got other students that I'm giving them more enjoyable music, I guess you would say. And they're still very good, but they're just not as driven to, play professionally or semi-professionally or whatever. So I've got a good mix of, teaching, really standard works that, I might have worked on in college to these high school kids. And then other students that, just developing and making music an enjoyable experience. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. We're supposed to be enjoying, playing music. So,
yeah, no doubt about it, of course. But so you've been able to. It's been a weird several months here for everybody, for teachers no less than anyone else. You're able to connect virtually with your students these days, I'm presuming, and
yes.
we don't know how long that will continue to be the case, or whether you'll get back to doing live lessons later this school year or not. I guess that just remains to be seen how the whole situation progresses. We're somewhat in the same situation with performances. We have plans, and we hope that we are able to follow through on them, and we'll just have to kind of keep adjusting as we are required to do. That's all anybody can do in this situation, I suppose. Let's talk just for a moment about the beginning of the Tchaikovsky. The Tchaikovsky Symphony has this fate motive that's often referred to. That we hear in all the different movements. We hear it right at the very beginning of the first movement, and it's a motto that we hear in each of the movements, comes back at the very end of the last movement in a kind of victorious, celebratory, triumphant way. But it's introduced to us first by the clarinets, and it's very soft, and it's in a minor key, and it's dark, I guess is the way to describe it. And we often talk about colors in music. I'm not sure whether casual listeners how much they know what that really is referring to. In the woodwind world, I think of clarinets and bassoons who are able to produce what I would call a dark tone color. Tell me a little bit about the way that you are able to play so softly, I guess, on your instrument, especially in this lower range. What's special about the low range of a clarinet?
Well, I think there's several questions there, I guess. So one thing that helps the clarinet is the fact that we're a single reed instrument, which means there's one piece of cane wood that's attached to the mouthpiece, versus an oboe or bassoon has two reeds that vibrate against each other. For us, we've got the mouthpiece, one reed, and that reed vibrates against that mouthpiece.
Okay.
Therefore, I guess you could think about it in a way, eliminated half of the issues by taking away half of the reeds.
I see, yeah.
And so that single reed, all we need to do is get that one reed to vibrate. And if we can do that, we can play, anything we want to. But that little bit of vibration, I think, allows us with the single reed to play extreme dynamics. Maybe string or piano could play softer than clarinet, but I suppose,
yeah.
But yeah. I feel like the clarinet probably has the softest ability on the instrument naturally. Anyone can practice and figure out how to play softer than someone else, I guess. But and I think what Tchaikovsky does is he writes, the beginning very, very soft in this low register, so that lowness, the low octaves or registers help us produce that deep and dark, rich, almost ominous sound at the beginning of the symphony.
Yes, it is. It is very ominous. It's foreboding. It just seems murky and shadowy and not quite clear somehow. And I think it's because of that. As you say, I guess that the ability to just have that one little piece of wood vibrating that allows you to play so softly. but yet you can play also very loudly. You have this sort of register that's can be very penetrating, almost trumpet-like when you need it to be.
Yeah. So, and that maybe we could say, if we're talking colors, right, the low being dark, that register is maybe higher in pitch, so higher in the register.
Right.
And that's going to produce typically, brighter, more vibrant sound.
Yes, exactly. And so composers know that, of course, but of course, you as a player, you have to kind of lean into those tendencies, I guess you would say.
Yeah, embrace it.
Exactly right. Tell me a little bit about, I've never asked you this question before, about vibrato and clarinet. Can we talk about that for a second? Instruments like the violin and all the string instruments, we're talking about the amount of vibrato you want to use, how wide or how narrow is the vibrato, how fast is the vibrato, how much are you going to use depending on the style of the instrument, the style of the composer. Clarinets generally play without vibrato, yes?
Yeah, so that's a mixed bag of emotions, I guess. So classically, standard clarinet players will not use vibrato. We will what we consider a straight tone, which means
Right.
it's pure sound, as though if you were to go to the piano and hit a key, I know it'll fade away on piano, but it hits the note and it stays the same. It doesn't deviate pitch slightly to create the vibrato.
Right.
For some reason, classical clarinets, I guess the tradition has been to use straight tone, even though there are some parts of the world where classical clarinetists do use vibrato in all of their musics. Typically, it's more in England they do this, where no matter what they're playing, they're adding vibrato, kind of like how flute or oboe would on any of their music or phrases.
Right.
And then obviously jazz, people would use vibrato for that. And I think maybe jazz is because a lot of the clarinet players are saxophonists that have also switched over, and it's standard on saxophone to use vibrato.
Right. So these are conscious choices that you're able to make, right? You're able to. It's not just a matter of whatever technique I am schooled in playing. It's you're able to move back and forth as the style requires. Is that essentially it?
Yeah. If the style requires it, I definitely can do it. And there's some cases in orchestra or classical music where maybe adding a touch of vibrato gives the piece a little more character or emotion, or something like that. But I think typically we try to avoid that for whatever reason. It's just a common practice of our instrument.
Yeah, no, it certainly is, and it's I think it works with the other colors that are generally around the clarinet. It sort of works in the orchestral blend somehow. So,
Yeah.
all right, well let's hear this first movement of the Tchaikovsky Symphony with that beautiful and brooding opening played for us primarily by the low woodwinds, the clarinets taking the lead there. And actually, at the very end of the movement, you also have an important role to play as well. It kind of goes from dark to dark by the end of the first movement. But a gorgeous piece of music for sure, and one that I hope our listeners will enjoy. So again, Jake, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today. Great to see you, and we hope to see you again very soon, virtually or in person, as we start to make some music together again this season. But until that time, take care.
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Okay, here we go. Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 5, first movement.